So now let's take a look at what's trending on bold.global. Point your browser to bold, www.bold.global. In the latest headline, Bold's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Kevin Campbell, writes a piece about healthcare and Trump. And what does it mean? What does a Trump presidency mean for healthcare? And what will he do to do away with, or what's he going to keep? Dr. Campbell's here with us to discuss that. So this healthcare, actually, let's go ahead also and bring in a few other people who are joining us too, because we might have them come into the conversation. Demetrius Minor is here on Skype. He can talk to us he'll talk to us about some other topics later on the evening. And then Huey Newsom is also here with us as well. So, but we'll start on healthcare, and everybody can join in. This is something that's concerning a lot of people. What's he going to do with Obamacare? He ran on repealing Obamacare, and then this week he's talked about all the different things he might want to keep.
You know, I think actually he's making some good decisions. Two things he says he's going to keep. One, he's going to allow young people to stay on their parents' insurance until age 26. And that's very important because millennials are starting their jobs, they're finishing their education, and that's an expense that the parents are willing to pay. The second thing he's going to do is make sure that you aren't denied insurance because of a pre-existing condition. And that's really, really important as well, because we want people to get coverage. Everything else, I think he really is going to move towards repeal and replace. However, he's got an issue. You can't repeal this legislation with a simple majority. He would have to starve it, just like the bill that went before Obama, he vetoed that bill. They defunded Obamacare. So I think he's going to be hopefully slow and measured and do this in a very sensible way.
Talk us through that. Talk us through, for those who, including me, who aren't into the weeds on the legislation. They cannot take a vote that simply by majority repeals it. They're going to do conciliation essentially in order to defund it.
Exactly. And I think what they'll do is they'll start defunding particular parts of it. You already see one problem. Right now, the very expensive patients that are insured by insurers were guaranteed that the government would pay them back some monies. Well, Congress did not fund that, and Obama has been taking Treasury funds and paying them, and there's a court case pending in that where that's not going to happen, and I suspect that will stop on January 20th. If we don't legislate and change what we're doing with Obamacare, it's going to starve, and it is absolutely going to implode. Our lawmakers have to do something to take care of patients.
Huey, you're here to talk about other things too, but give us your thought on this. I mean, how do you keep people on their insurance? How do you keep people from being denied health care when they have pre-existing conditions, but yet get rid of the thing that everybody hates, which is the mandate?
Well, that's the funny part, right? Because I think people don't understand the benefits of Obamacare. I'm not saying it's a perfect piece of legislation, but keeping the good parts and doing away with the bad parts, and then trying to figure out how to fund it, it is by definition is going to implode. I think what's going to happen with the Trump administration and this Republican Congress, they're going to find that either through pain or through conversation, hopefully through conversation and review, that it's impossible to keep the good parts. Everybody wants to keep the good parts, but it's constructed in such a way that the good and the good and the bad have to come together.
Well, Democrats have said they're willing to work with President Trump, which means that somewhere along this path, if they want to be able to keep these good parts, they're going to have to potentially give in on certain things. What?
Yes.
Well,
and let's pull Demetrius in on that question and ask him what. First of all, you were never Trump this whole time. Are you a little bit excited now that he might be able to repeal Obamacare?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I wouldn't say I was excited. I'm skeptical in some ways, but I think that there's going to be a huge pressure for Trump to repeal Obamacare, and with a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate, I'm cautiously optimistic that something can be done. It definitely, I prefer for it to be totally repealed and replaced. But if they're able,
what would you replace it with?
Well, I'm for competition among state lines. I'm for states deciding which healthcare plans is more feasible and also more doable for their constituents. I'm not for a federal takeover.
How can states make those decisions about how do we reconcile letting states determine which plans are feasible for their constituents with allowing competition across state lines? I mean, aren't those two things contradictory? If a state's going to decide what health care plans are available, yet their people are still allowed to compete across state lines, how does that work?
Well, I do believe that when you present people with choice and when you present people with various options, then they're able to make decisions for themselves.
But doesn't that completely contradict the idea of letting states determine what's best for people and what's best for their constituents? That's not necessarily choice, is it?
I don't think it's contradictory at all. If you provide people with choices via the free market, and instead of mandating them and dictating to them, says, hey, you have this one option, and the one option is government alone. I don't think that's contradictory by any means.
Kevin, you got thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I think we've got two different issues here, and I think competition across state lines for insurers is going to increase product, it's going to decrease cost, and it's going to increase choice. One thing that Trump is thinking about doing is for the Medicaid folks, the folks that are in that middle uninsured area, he's going to give a block grant to the states, and that money goes to the states. And that's good and bad. Some people may get left out. States may raise taxes, but here's what's good about it: the health needs in Alabama are going to be different than the health needs in Oregon. So basically, Alabama may want to focus on hypertension and diabetes prevention, and Oregon may want to focus on something else. So it gives a little bit, but I worry people are going to get left out.
Right. We're going to have to move on in a second, but I want you to comment, Huey. Is this an area that Democrats could potentially give in on, or no?
I think so. But I think the key thing is you hit the nail on the head. How do we get to preventive medicine? Because at the end of the day, all these plans aren't looking at the real issue, which is the explosion in cost of healthcare. And none of them are really looking at how do we make you, our individual selves, we are our best doctors. How do we promote that? That's the key.
Sure. Well, we got to leave right there.
We wish we could solve this right now, but healthcare is something that is
5 more minutes.
a long. We can handle it all, right?
So, our next topic that's trending on Bold.global, go to www.bold.global and check out a piece from Demetrius. So, Demetrius, tell us about your piece on Esther's List. So, this just debuted this week. It's a new political action committee, and you guys are trying to help support Christian conservatives around the country and encourage them to run for office. Tell us a little bit more. You're the new executive director, so congrats.
Thank you, and thank you, Carrie and Clay, for both having me on this morning. Esther's List is pretty much what I will call the moral alternative to Emily's List, which is targeted towards pro-choice candidates, particularly women being elected to office. So what Esther's List is saying, we fundamentally believe that Christian conservatives and also constitutional conservatives are very vital to the existence of our country, and we believe that when they're the most vocal, we believe that good things happen. And so we're focusing on getting conservative Christian candidates elected, not just on a federal level, because too many people look at a federal level as the antidote to all our problems, but on a state and local level, state senate, state house, school board, whatever the case may be, to get the conservative agenda pushed to their constituents. And we're very excited about this new endeavor.
So this is one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Oh, I knew you would like this one.
I'm sure you know. As a Christian myself, I always am very interested in trying to reconcile the argument that someone can be a constitutionalist and yet be interested in making sure that politicians base their decisions on Christian values. So especially when the First Amendment specifically says that we don't make laws based on religion. So how do you reconcile those two things? Because that's just something that has fascinated me for years.
Well, also in the First Amendment, it does also say that you have freedom of speech and you also have freedom of religion. So obviously, those who are religious or those who are spiritual minded and guided by biblical principles and morals, I believe that those people, conscientious people, should be very vocal and should be very active in the political process, especially those people who are looking for change, those looking for good change, and those people who want to hold our leaders accountable. I believe that those are the ones that should be at the forefront of the fight.
Absolutely, and I certainly agree that there's a moral imperative to make sure that people are allowed to speak their minds, and certainly we always use our personal mores and values in order to determine what we support. But making a law based on a Christian principle is complicated for me. Huey, you have some thoughts.
I'm shaking. I'm nodding my head because I'm in such strong agreement. And I think that what happens is, a couple for me in this election is that you have Christians that are looking for people to push their laws and morals onto the general public, right? So I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, Demetrius is obviously a Christian as well, but we have this conundrum here when we have a Donald Trump who, has not espoused to those morals consistently. I'm not judging him.
Well, he does love 2 Corinthians.
He loves 2 Corinthians, and we also know about him in married women. So we won't dwell on that. But that's the conundrum, right? That's the irony that he's going to be the person that's the moral arbiter for all of us.
Well, and that's what I heard in response to that, because I felt the same way. I'm not religious, but I am spiritual, and I grew up in a Christian home. The justification evangelicals give for supporting him is that we didn't want a pastor in chief, we wanted a protector in chief. So even if he is a flawed character, he's at least going to protect our religious liberties.
But this is also an argument for why, Demetrius, I think you are very active in pushing Esther's list, because you want people who, I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, you want people running for office who don't just talk about it but actually walk. Don't just talk the talk but walk the walk. Is that what you're looking for with your candidates?
Well, exactly, Clay. Scripture does inform us that faith without works is dead. In regards to Donald Trump, I was a very vocal never Trumper, but as an American citizen, and I believe it's my Christian duty to give him a chance and to give him the benefit of the doubt. Now, that said, Donald Trump is just one singular person. And yes, I do understand that he's the president of the United States and that he's our biggest spokesperson and our biggest representative. But we have issues that go beyond Donald Trump. And so I believe that if people want to make the biggest change, if they want to make the biggest impact, that starts in their own backyard. Donald Trump as one individual will not be able to do that. And so that's why I believe that the Christian faith has the biggest impact is when we go to our neighbors, when we go to those people that live in our neighborhoods, in our communities. And I'm talking about on the state level, on a local level, and that when we talk to them and that we encourage good, moral, sound policy, that we can make the biggest impact that Donald Trump ever could.
Well, I'll tell you what I like about Bold is that people can have different opinions, and then we can all come around the table to talk about them. I think it's great that you're certainly out there trying to get people to run for office that have the same beliefs that you do, and I will continue to be a force to push on the other side to make sure we're not making laws based on religion. But I think what you're doing is great. But that does beg a certain specific question, because there's a particular part of the population that has struggled with reconciling their religious beliefs, often sometimes with Donald Trump's views. One group of voters that sometimes makes their decisions a lot of times based on religion, black conservatives. They're not that many of them, but they certainly are there. There's certainly not as many of them as there are black Democrats, but they are there, and they have this question. And Huey Newsom is here to talk about his article, which which addresses that specifically.
Yeah, I think that black conservatives really struggled in this. Well, some of us did really struggle with this election because Donald Trump did such, let's say, a poor job of reaching out to minority communities. Some would say that he, even espoused bigotry throughout his supporters, right? So he silently allowed that to happen and used that to really generate enthusiasm, right? It was safe to be, to have certain views. And so the piece that I did for the Post really focused on this conundrum, right? This challenge that the GOP, this challenge really didn't start with Donald Trump. We didn't get to this point with Donald Trump, with white nationalists, the alt-right, even though we started using those terms in this election. The wink, wink, nod, nod that's been going on within the party to kind of say, yeah, that's not acceptable, but we'll allow it to happen anyway. It's not just African Americans, it's also Latinos.
No, that started back in the 60s.
Absolutely.
It's been going on for decades.
Strategy,
it's
right?
Southern strategy and
Well,
the Civil Rights Act and Barry Goldwater. And
let's not ignore the fact that Donald Trump did get more African American voters than Mitt Romney
true.
did.
From 6% to 8%.
Yeah, so
whoa. I'm not sure. Let's
You don't think it's true? You don't think it's true?
Maybe it's that the denominator shrunk because fewer African Americans, like we talked about before,
good point.
fewer
Yes.
African Americans voted.
Very
so
good
I'm
point.
not convinced that Donald Trump got a higher percentage. So
It was more people.
I like that
but
argument. That makes me feel better as a Democrat.
But I think part of it was too that that they didn't have the option to vote for the first black president.
Right.
Again, they
That's
already
very
did
true.
that
They
twice.
didn't show up, right?
They
And
didn't show
we
up. They
all
weren't
admit
as-
that Hillary Clinton
yeah.
necessarily did not engender a lot of enthusiasm amongst
Right.
people.
Sure.
But I'm going to take that one to the bank with me because I appreciate that argument quite a bit.
Use that
All
one.
right, we got to wrap right there on that note with that little
gonna take that.
bone
I'm
for
saving
you.
that one,
You
yes.
got a bone, Clay.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much, all of you,
Huey. Yeah,
Huey, Kevin,
Demetrius.
and Demetrius.
Kevin's going to stay with us because we got him later on.